we're back here with you again. Today we're going to be talking about place value again. And last lesson we talked about place value, the whole number place value clear to the billions. Now we're actually going to get into our decimal place value behind our decimal place, and we're going to learn our tenths and our hundredths. But before we start doing that, these are some notes that you will either be passed out if you're in the classroom to put into your journals and paste them in, but we will also have them in your Canvas online where you can always pull them up if you're ever at home. And when you're here, we'll be teaching you how to get into Canvas and to look into these. But anyways, we want to talk to you first about what a decimal number is. A decimal is a whole number and a fractional part, okay? So you've been used to working with whole numbers, and the whole numbers is what's in front of the decimal is all a whole number. Behind the decimal is the fractional part, and fraction means part. You know, breaking apart, fraction. And you can also, this is the decimal part. When we're talking about decimals, your decimals or anything less than 1 comes behind the decimal point. Your decimal serves as, basically it separates your whole number from your pieces. So if you're thinking with money, you've got your dollar bills and your change. The decimal is what separates how many dollars you have and how much change you have. The same here when you read regular numbers. So a decimal point, and that is very important for you to know, so we reiterate it here, a decimal point separates the whole number from the part, okay? Now, here are some examples of what is the whole number, what is the fractional part. So if I'm looking at this is 36, and remember we say the decimal point, we say and, okay? It's not gonna let me write. And 25, the 5 sits in the hundredths place. We'll talk about that here in a minute, so it's 25 hundredths. But most of you might know that from money anyways. If you think about it as $36.25, then you know that this number is somewhere between 36 and not quite 37. Think about that like money. So I'm hoping this will write, but for some reason we're not able to yet. We got wonderful new computers, and maybe my writing utensil isn't on here. So when you read this is 36. You read the whole number like you would normally read a whole number. Then all you do is you read the back part of it just like a whole number. We're going to go into this, and it's 25 hundredths. On this one, this is 469 and 17 hundredths. The 469 is your whole number, okay? 17 hundredths is your part. Think about it in money form, $469.17. Well, you don't have, it looks like a big, huge number with just a little tiny decimal, but really you don't have a big number here. This number is actually somewhere between the whole numbers of 469 and 470. Okay. And on this one, where they hold a 0, and it is proper to put a 0 in that whole number place before the decimal. We don't say anything here. It's okay right now if you want to read it 0 and 35 hundredths, but the way that it is read and the way that you will see it written is just 35 hundredths. When you see decimals, sometimes, and for your case, since we really only go into the hundredths, we only have to, since we only go into the hundreds, you can read it like it's money. And so 35 cents, I know that's not a lot. So this is somewhere, if I was looking at where this was on a number line, this would be somewhere between 0 and 1 on the number line. 35 cents is not quite $1, but it's still more than nothing, right? So reading a decimal. To read a decimal, we have to know our place value, and that's what we're going to be talking with you. We've already learned to our billions, house. Now we're going to focus on the place behind the decimal. which is 2. The 2 here is in the tenths place. And then you have 3 hundredths. If you kind of look, it almost looks like they're kind of mirrored, but what do we notice? Pause and notice. What do you notice about this 10 and this 10 and this 100 and this 100? Pause for a minute and pause your video and look at it and think about this for a minute. Okay, well, hopefully you notice that the only difference between this is besides the ones being here, it almost looks like you could fold it and put it in half, except for the decimal place has the THS at the end. And that's right. So if I can think about it, there is no such thing as a once. So, but we do have a tenths, okay? And hundredths, we say it with the TH, and I bet you if you've learned your place value from early on, we say ones, tens, hundreds. Guess what? Instead of, you don't say ones because there's no such thing as a once, but we say 10, but you put that TH there, tenths, hundredths. What do you think is going to come next? Thousands, 10,000s. Look, we even taught you a few more than what you need to know. So anyways, it's really important that during this next lesson and stuff, we're going to be really hitting that, and that you add these 2 places to your vocabulary. We're going to look into how to read a decimal number and how to write a decimal number. Now, this notes are really good because here's a number, and it has a decimal point, and the decimal point, it is moved over just a little bit. This little arrow should be hitting the decimal point, and I know that it's probably perfect on the papers that we pass out. So it says 173.19, okay? The decimal point separates. That's what you have to remember. Everything in front of the decimal is the whole number. That's why you see it written there. Everything behind it is your fractional part. So everything in front of your decimal, you read it as a whole number. 173. If it was in the thousand, if I had a 1 in front of it, another 1 here would be 1,173. You read it just like you read any whole number. Then when you see a decimal point, you say and. So every time you see the decimal point, you say and. Then you actually read whatever's behind the decimal point, just like a whole number. So all I see behind it is 19. And that's how you would say that, 19. But you read or you say the last digit's place. Well, if we come back up here, that 9 is 2 places. It's in the hundredths place. So the way I would read this is 173 and 19 hundredths. So you read that last one. And now I'm going to practice reading one with you, and then we're going to pause, and I want you to read through these, and I'll go back and read through these, and then maybe read them to your parents as well so they hear you saying them. So I'll show you. What I like to do on this one is I like for you to notice, try to think about where this number is between also. This number is, how I read it, 45 and 2 tenths. Also go back and ask yourself, between what 2 whole numbers does this number lie between? Well, just look at the whole number. It's between, think of money, $45 and, we put a 0 there, 20 cents. It's going to be somewhere between 45 and 46. Okay? Pause the video. Go through and see if you can read these. And when I come back, I'm going to read them and tell you between what 2 whole numbers they are. Alrighty. I hope you've had some good practice looking at this, reading these right. Anyways, this one says, this is 108 and 5 tenths. It is between 108 and 109. 35 and 68 hundredths. That 8 is in the hundredths place. Remember that decimal is in. Now, I just look at what's in front of the decimal. It's at 35, but not quite 36. 6. Ooh, 121 and 32 hundredths. Make sure you're putting that TH on the end. It's between 121 and 122. Every time you see a decimal number, I want you to look at it and look at just the whole number and think about where that number's between. Okay? Ooh. Remember, you just read the whole number part here. 6,343 and 21 hundredths. And that is between 6,343 on a number line, and the next counting number would be 6,344. On number 6, 33 and 21 hundredths. Okay, I know that you've mastered this. You can even create some of your own numbers and read them, or have your parents write some and you read them. Okay. If you can read a decimal correctly, you can write it. Okay? So here, you're looking at how they're written into word form. For example, when we taught you how to read it, you read the whole number part first, then you say and, then you read the fractional part, and you say the last digit's place value. This is 173 and 13 hundredths. Well, guess how you would write it? The same way you would say it properly with place value. 173 and 13 hundredths. And since right now my smartboard is not doing PDFs, I will read these to you and know that that's the way you would write it. And it will work on the Smart Notebook. Oh, yes. Actually, I can write them on this board for you. We'll take this down. This is definitely real life. Okay, the first number was 23 and 5 hundredths. So this is the whole, and you read it that way. 23. The decimal you write, you remember what we say? And then you read this just like you would. We don't say 05 because that's not how we would read that number. We would just say 5. 5, and what place is that 5 in though? That's the most important thing. It's in the hundredths place with the TH, S, and so you'd write hundredths. Okay, awesome. Let's look at your last number, and I'm going to pull a different color here so you can see it. Ooh, this one's fun. This one's fun because what is our whole number? Our whole number is 0. So if we were to look at that, think about it as money. I'm going to put a little ghost 0 here, 50 cents. We're not quite to $1. So this number is somewhere between 0 and 1. This is our whole. This is our fractional part. Remember, the decimal separates. When you don't have anything in the whole, you don't have to write anything for it because you don't say it. All you do is you say the decimal part, which we would read 5. And what place is that 5 in? The tenths place. So this is just 5 tenths. You don't even have to read the and. We know that it's behind the decimal because of the TH on to THS on the tenths. So definitely have your parents go back, give you a little bit more review. Every time you see a decimal number, I want you reading it correctly. We want you saying it with place value. And also look at every decimal number and say, where is that on the number line? Look at the whole number part. That is somewhere between 23, but not quite 24. This will help you really get used to looking at these numbers, because I could put a huge number up there with a decimal and it looks very big to us when it could be a really small number. Okay, and I am going to turn this over for your Smartboard lesson over this. Okay guys, we're going to talk about place value again. Now, this place value chart looks a little different than the one we talked about in the previous lesson. Notice your decimal point is in here now. So, you'll want to make a place value chart and you'll want to include the ones, the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, and I'm kind of picky on something like that. I really want you to put, we'll see if it, the comma right there. Because you want to put the comma between the periods. So, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. What's next? 10,000s, 100,000, and finally, the millions. And again, I'm going to put my comma right there. So that's what we did in the previous lesson. Well, today, Miss Witt talked to you about decimals. So we are going to add 2 more places. The first place to the right of the decimal point is called the tenths place. Just like Miss Witt said earlier, it's a mirror image of what's in the whole numbers. We don't have a ones place again, so we have tenths and we have hundreds. Notice when you look at it and we're talking about it decimal wise. Decimal point 1 represents tenths. 0 decimal point 0.01 represents hundreds because that 1 is in the second place over from the decimal point and that place says hundreds. Okay? So, you might want to copy this down on your grid paper or your journal or something like that, and I'm going to give you a few moments. Okay, let's move on. All right, again, here's your place value chart, just like we talked about. Okay, sometimes the number 1 will be considered units. So just know you may see it multiple ways, but you have your decimal point. As Miss Witt said, to the left of the decimal point, when you're looking at it, is your whole numbers. To the right is the fractional parts. So, you should have this part down pretty well. Unit or 1, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000, million, and they don't even take it as far as what we would like for you to take it. To the right of the decimal point, you have tenth, hundreds, and even thousands. And notice, decimal-wise we talked about it, but they're even giving you a look at what it looks like fractional-wise, which we will be talking about too at some point. Okay, to write a number in expanded form. All right, let's make this real easy. Always find your decimal point. For me, you can circle the whole number and underline the fractional part. And think about where it is in the place value chart. All right, that 3 is in the ones place, right? So, if I'm going to write this in expanded form, I'm going to write just the number 3. Okay? Now remember, we're adding the value of the places. Okay, there is nothing in the tens place. There is no number in the tens place. So guess what? You can leave that off. You don't have to put something there to hold the place. But look at the 8. What place does the 8 fall in? It falls into the hundreds place. So you have to write it the way you see it. Now, if I was going to add these up together just a little, taking you a little farther, I would line them up. 3 would be right there. Now remember, 3 is a whole number. To the right of the 3 is a decimal point. Even if we don't see it there, that decimal point is always going to be to the right of the whole number, whatever the last digit is in the whole number. Okay?
if I line them up, and we're going to talk about this later on, line them up, load them up, I'm going to show you. That 3 is like having $3. That 8 hundredths is like having 8 pennies or 8 cents. And when you add them up, you have $3.08, or you have 3 and 8 hundredths. They mean the same thing. $3.08 or 3 and 8 hundredths. So this is an expanded form right here. Let's look at the next one, and I'll move it up just a little bit. Okay, this one's a little more challenging because we have more numbers. There is my whole number. There is my fraction. If you need to put these numbers in a place value chart, please do that to make it easier for yourself. Okay, the first number I'm looking at is the number 1. The value for that 1 is 1,000. So I'm going to put 1,000 right there. And my addition sign. There is nothing in the hundreds place. The 0 is there to hold that place, but the 0 has 0 value at this point. So the next number I'm looking at is the number 8. Remember, the number 8 is in the tens place, so the value of that 8 is 80. Okay, the next number that I'm looking at is the number 5. That 5 is in the ones place, so the value of that number 5 is 5 ones. Okay, now we're going into something we hadn't really talked about. The value when we're doing it for expanded form on this number. There is no 0. There's 0 holds a place in the tens place, so I don't have to write that. But the 6 is in the hundreds place, and the way you would do this is you could put a 0, decimal point, that 6 is in the hundreds place, so you would rewrite it exactly the way it looks here. If you added them all up, it would be 1,085 and 6, and that 6 is sitting in the hundreds place, so you would say 6 hundredths. Okay, if you want to, practice a few on your own so that you can get the hang of what it looks like in the place value chart when you're doing it with expanded form. Okay, now we're going to talk about expanded notation. And remember in the previous lesson when Miss Witt talked about expanded notation was multiplying. That's what expanded notation represents. It's multiplication. So it says to write a number in expanded notation, take each digit and times it by its place value. Then add the pieces together. That's where you put the addition sign. For zeros in that number, just skip over. So you can skip over where the zeros are. You don't need to write them. That's just something extra and you don't need to do that. So let's look at the first one. Okay, again, whole number, fraction. So that 3 is a whole number. That 3 falls into the ones place. So you would say 3 times what place is it in? It's in the ones place. And 3 times 1 we know is 3. Okay. There is nothing in the tens place. It's adding a 0. So we're not going to worry about that. But we have to do something with that 8. Well, you're going to take what the number is. So the number is 8. You're going to multiply it by what the value or what that place represents. Well, when I look at it, that says 100. So when I multiply 8 times 100, I get 8 hundredths. And that's where you get that answer right there. So this is 3 and 8 hundredths. Let's look at the next one. This one's going to take it a little bit farther. Okay, again, the 1 is in the thousands place, so I'm going to say 1 times 1,000. Now, remember you're adding the pieces together, plus, there's nothing in the hundreds place, so I'm going to skip the hundreds place. 8 is in the tens place, so I'm going to say parenthesis 8 times, and that 8 is in the tens place, so 8 times 10. Again, adding it together. That 5 is in the ones place, so I'm going to say 5 times 1 Now, nothing's in the tens place, so I'm going to go to the hundreds place. The number there is 6. So I'm going to write my 6 down. That 6 is in the hundreds place. So the value in the hundreds place is 0.01. And now you have that number in expanded notation. I would write some more numbers down, maybe something easier. If you're ready for something a little bit more challenging, put a number in the tens place. Make your whole number a little larger. Okay, this one, you're going to do both. Okay, remember expanded form is basically adding the value of the places, and expanded notation is multiplication. Here's your place value chart again, from the millions all the way to the hundreds. Remember your decimal point. Okay, so the first one we have is 12 and 25 hundredths. You know, the best way that you can do this is to look at that number and say it to yourself. If you can say it, as Miss Witt said, you can write it. So, 12 is your whole number, and 25 hundredths is the fractional part. And I like to label mine to remind me of where I'm going to put this. So the first one I'm going to do is expanded form. So that 1 is in the tens place, so that 1 represents 10. That 2 is in the ones place. I'm not finished. Now, here's something that we hadn't done earlier because we had zeros in those places. You've got the number 2. That number 2, if I put that number in the place value chart, would fall in the tens place. I have to write it with a decimal point because it is a part of a fraction. So I'm going to have decimal point 2. Now, you can write it this way or you can write it that way. Whatever makes you feel more comfortable. This will help you to remember that it's not a whole number. But that decimal point is also there to help you remember it's not a whole number. And then the last number is 5. Okay, if I wrote 0, decimal point, that 5 falls in the hundreds place, which means there's nothing in the tens place, but there's 5 hundredths. Okay, let's do it in expanded notation. Remember, expanded notation is multiplying. So, I've got the number 1. It is in the tens place, so I'm going to multiply 1 times 10. Remember, we're adding. That 2 is in the ones place, so I'm going to say 2 times 1, and then I'm adding again. That number 2, after the decimal point, is in the tenths place, so I'm going to say 2 times, and what represents tenths? I'm going to put 0, decimal point 1, and then one more I'm adding. That 5 is in the hundredths place, so I'm going to say 5 times the value of what the hundredths place stands for, 0, decimal point 0, 1. So, expanded form, expanded notation. And just like Mrs. Witt said earlier to you, and I should have brought that one down here, but you can see it. You have to think about that word expanded. That means that number is going to grow. Now, I will tell you, expanded form is going to be shorter than expanded notation. Expanded notation is really going to grow that number because you're putting multiplication in there. You're taking that number and multiplying it by the place that that number's in. Whereas in expanded form, you're only taking the value of the digit and adding them together. So, remember that. Expanded form is always going to be a little bit shorter than expanded notation. Okay, the second one. Read it first. 308 and that 4 drops into the tenths place. So 308 and 4 tenths. Again, I like to get myself prepared. There's my whole number. There's my fractional part. Now I'm ready to go. Expanded form. Value of each place. The value of that 3 is in the hundredths place. so it represents 300. That value of what's in the tens place is a 0. I can skip it. That value of the 8 is in the ones place, so it represents 8 ones. Now, that value of the 4 is in the decimal point. I can put a 0 to show there's no whole number, but decimal point 4. If I lined them up, straight up and down, and added them up, that says 308 and 4/10, or it could be $308.40. And you'll learn later on that you can drop a 0 in there. Okay, expanded notation. I'm going to go back and do the same thing. Okay, that 3 is in the hundreds place, so I'm going to say 3 times 100. I like the parentheses because it keeps everything together. 3 times 100 plus that 8 is in the ones place. 8, whoops, let's move that down. 8 times 1. That there is the decimal point, so I know that I'm going to put the 4 and drop it right here. So that 4 is in the 4 times 0.1. Now, if you're struggling, there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can take your number and you can put it in the place value chart, okay? Or you can take your number, draw your lines like Miss Witt did earlier, and label them 1, 10s, hundreds. I would label this where you can see it's THS, okay? That way you know that you are working with the fractions, okay? Again, we'll practice this, but we want you to have this so that you can look back on it. This is what the videos are being made for, so that you can at any time go back and look at the lesson. Okay, now, here's a little practice for you. You will want to look back at your notes in order to help you out. We have 3 columns. Standard form. Remember, if you don't remember what standard form is, think about it. It is the numbers just written in digit form. Expanded form. You're making them a little larger, but you're looking at the value of each number. You're writing the value. Expanded notation. You're taking that number and you're multiplying it by the place that the number is in. So you've got 3 forms right here. Standard, expanded, and expanded notation. So I'm going to fill in 2 for you. Then we're going to pause the video and you are going to fill in the rest of this. If we're doing it online, you'll be able to fill it out online because you'll have Cami to fill it in with. If you're doing it in the classroom, we'll probably have paper and pencil. One way or the other, you'll be filling this in. All right, so let's look at, I've got the whole number 25. Now, if I'm a little confused, I'm going to put my decimal point there to remind myself that that 25 represents a whole number. If that is the case, that's the ones place, that's the tens place. You can put it in a place value chart, you can do it this way, okay? So, that 2 represents 20. The value of that 2 is 20. The value of that 5, it's in the ones place, so the value of that 5 is 5. So in expanded form, it would be 20 plus 5. Expanded notation, the same way. That 2 is in the tens place. Remember, notation is multiplication. Both of them are adding between each number, and then expanded form is looking at the value of it. Okay? So 2 times, that 2 is in the tens place, so 2 times 10 plus. That 5 is in the ones place, 5 times 1 is 5. Pretty easy for your whole numbers. Okay, we're going to give you a little bitty break. I'm going to go ahead and do this one right here. So to give you an example. Now, when I look at this, that 2 is a whole number. It is my only whole number. So I can do it the way that I did it earlier. Here's a whole. This right here is fraction. something to help myself. I can take these numbers, let's see. I can do this. I can put just slashes to make my places, and I can say, okay, that 2 sits in the ones place. That 1/10 sits one place to the right of the decimal point. That 4 sits 2 places because it drops into the hundreds. Look, I have my number in standard form. So it's 2 and 14 hundredths. Now, we gave you expanded form. Go back to the original one to help you when you get it in standard form. So I know 2 is my whole number, and it's in the ones place. 2 times 1 plus, that 1 is in the tens place. So 1 times decimal point z, or decimal point, let's rewrite that. So 1 times 0 decimal point 1. And that 4 is in the hundreds place, so 4 times 0 decimal point 0.01. Sorry that didn't copy down as well, but you can see it. Now, we're going to pause the video. We're going to give you time to fill in the rest of this. Refer back to your notes, refer back to the video to help you out. Look at your place value chart. This is the time, if you're at home, you know, all you have to do is let us know, and we can come on and do a Google Meet with you, or however we're supposed to meet up. If you're in the classroom, we can pull you towards us to work on it. Last one. Okay. We didn't want to leave off words, because remember we have standard form, expanded notation, and word form. Okay, I'm going to show you this. And then I'm going to pause, and I want you to look at each one of these and write out what they are in word form. Okay, remember, that decimal point stands for what? The word and. Think about what is the whole number. Think about what is the part. Think about, put them in a place value chart if you want to. Now, this one and this one are going to challenge you just a little bit. But we gave you a place value chart at the beginning of this lesson that took you to that place. So we just want to challenge you just a little, okay? You should be able to do this one, this one, this one, and this one with no problem. This one and this one, just a little bit more effort. So pause it, get busy, and we'll come back out. Okay, are you ready? Okay, we'll do the easy ones first. All right, let's look at this one. Read it. If you can read it, you can write it. 44 and. That 4 drops into the hundreds place. So 44 and 4 hundredths. You should have written that down. Let's see what it is. 44 and 4 hundredths. Good job. Let's look at the next one. There is no whole number. So you're not going to write the word and you don't have to say 0 in front of it. You're just going to write the fractional part. So I know that's 46. But I have to think about, okay, what place do I think about? Well, that 6 drops into the hundredths place. Because that 6 drops into the hundredths place, I'm going to say this is 46 hundredths. Please do not forget to write the THS. If you forget to write it, you will have said 46 hundredths. And you're going to learn later on that you can have the number 46 hundredths, but it's going to make your number larger. Okay, we're going to skip this one. Let's look at this one. Pretty easy. 4 and that 6 is in the tenths place. So you should say 4 and 6/10. Let's look at the next one. It's a little larger whole number. 440 that's the whole number, 440. And that 4 is in the tens place, 440, 440, and 4 tenths. Okay, now let's go back and look at the challenging ones. Remember Miss Witt told you that it was a mirror image? So you had tenths, hundreds, thousands. Well, it's the same way. Tenths, hundreds, thousands. So your whole number is pretty easy. It's 4. So you've got 4 and, well, when I look at that, what is that number? Read it as you see it. 404. The only thing you have to do is think about what place is that 4 in. It's in the thousands place. So you're going to read it as, or you're going to write it as 4 and 404 thousandths. How many of you got that right? I hope you all did. All right, let's look at the last one. Oh my goodness, look at the zeros there. Okay, again, you don't read, if there's nothing in the whole number, you do not have to say 0. Therefore, you do not have to say the word and. You just write what you see. Okay, I see the number 46. But what place am I going to say afterwards? Well, that 6, if I put it in a place value chart like I should, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So when I write that out, I should be saying 46 thousandths. Okay, guys, go back over this lesson. If you're not sure, go back to the vocabulary words that Miss Witt gave you at the beginning of this lesson. Think about it, watch this over and over, practice at home, and we will see you later. Bye.